Hello everyone. Today's video is another Q&A video talking today about high-dose sulfur therapy, talking about mitochondria, and talking about neurofeedback as it might apply to different chronic conditions. As per usual, nothing I'm saying should be construed as medical advice. This is for informational purposes only. If you need medical advice, please talk to your healthcare provider to get that advice. So a couple of questions about the high-dose sulfur therapy. The one question says, how do you counteract the insomnia effect of such a high dose of MSM? So bearing in mind that high-dose sulfur is achieved by taking high doses of MSM, also known as methyl sulfonylmethane. So to be perfectly frank, it's been very, very, very rare that I've seen any insomnia effects from MSM. I understand that it is an effect that some folks report, but it's really, really rare to see that in my experience. I've recommended high-dose MSM to hundreds of patients now, and I haven't seen it cause an insomnia effect in more than maybe one or two patients at most. The one or two patients that I've seen, we just brought them down to a lower dose and then brought the dose up more slowly, and then that's what cleared it up. If I had a patient who was having insomnia from MSM, I mean, sometimes it might sound very obvious, but sometimes this is the thing that folks need to hear. They just take it earlier in the day, so some folks are taking it too late in the day. But if taking it first thing in the morning did not rectify the insomnia issue from it in one of my patients, and then it seemed like it was helping them in a meaningful way. And then we tried lowering the dose, and we just could not seem to find a sweet spot where they were not getting any insomnia from it. But the MSM was really helping. Then I would probably recommend some type of a sleep aid for them so that they could still get the benefits of the MSM without having, and then deal with the insomnia separately. But so far I have only seen it in one, maybe two cases, and that's how we rectified it. So I hope it's not a insolvable problem for folks out there. MSM doesn't help everybody that goes on it, but in my experience, definitely helps the vast majority. And there's just if folks can't tolerate MSM, there are other ways to go about, things to help with joints and gut healing and all the different things MSM can help with. But in terms of actually replicating the MSM and getting the sulfur into the equation, which is really, to the current understanding, that's the main reason that we care, or that we want the MSM. That's what it does. I just don't really know of an alternative method, unfortunately. There's just no other sulfur supplements out there that I'm aware of, at least. So anyways, I'll leave it there for now for that one. There's another question here. It says basically really bad sulfur farts with MSM. Assuming pushing detox and changing microbiome. Also, I recall you meant, okay, and then they had a second question too. So it's a good question. To date, I have had, so the most common thing I hear with folks going on MSM, if they have pre-existing digestive issues, is that their gas and bloating goes down. So that's what I oftentimes see. I have had some patients where they have had an increase in gas and bloating, and typically, sound like a broken record here, but typically we just lower the dose to a tolerated dose, and then they gradually build it up, and then it's well tolerated. I have had some patients, of say maybe the dozen or so patients that I've had to date, who we have not been able to find a sweet spot for MSM for them. Then probably half of them, 1/3 to 1/2 of them, we had to stop because it was increasing their bloating. Now, I think that there's a good chance that it's related to microbiome alteration. It could be due to a die-off effect potentially, but it could also be a microbiome alteration. That's definitely a possibility. When there's sulfur-smelling gas, if it wasn't pre-existing, so if someone said, if one of my patients came in and said, I've got sulfur-smelling gas, and now I have more sulfur-smelling gas because of MSM, I'd be thinking, microbiome alteration or a die-off or something like that. If I had a patient who said, I've say got X, Y, or Z issues, and now I started MSM, and now my gas smells like sulfur, I would be mostly suspicious that we were feeding some type of a sulfur, like a hydrogen sulfide gas producing microbe, either in the gut, like in the large intestine, or the small intestine. That would be the most likely explanation, because my understanding is sulfur smelling gas is due to hydrogen sulfide gas production, and so it might be that the sulfur is contributing to that. Now, I don't know that I've had anyone have sulfur smelling gas as a side effect of taking MSM in my practice to date. So I don't if I have, it's been maybe one or two people, and I don't know if there's been anyone. So I can't think of any examples off the top of my head. So that's about all I can say on that. But if there's any follow-up questions, feel free to post in the comment section below. Excuse me. And then the same individual asked, says, also I recommend, or I recall rather, you mentioned you do low-dose immunotherapy, which is true. Do you find that the Yersinia antigen will put Hashimoto's into remission? I have had, I've only tried the Yersinia LDI formula with a couple of patients with Hashimoto's, and I have not seen success with it, unfortunately. Just last weekend, or well, the weekend before last, I participated in Dr. Ty Vincent's annual LDI training course, or like, I don't know, he does a training course mixed in with like an update for those of us who have been using it for a long time. And so he was speaking about it because he talks about it every year, and he has had success with it. I just haven't tried it with more than a couple of patients. I've had quite a few patients with Hashimoto's over time. Just in most of those cases, we've just never got to the Yersinia. Now, I think that the question is, like, are we talking about, symptom remission, or are we talking about getting anti-TPO antibodies down to zero? So I've seen good success. The patients where I was using the Yersinia LDI, those couple of patients, we were using it because they were already doing well clinically. Symptom-wise, they were doing well with the other things that we'd implemented, like diet and certain supplements or whatever it was. But we were trying to use the Yersinia antigen to get their anti-TPO antibodies down, and that was not successful in those couple of cases, unfortunately. Trying to remember what Dr. Vincent said this last time around. I don't want to speak out of turn or incorrectly. I think he may have said that with like really elevated levels of antibodies, then it might not be able to get that down, but I don't remember for sure. But helping with symptoms and maybe getting lower levels of antibodies under control would be something worth trying. But I'll leave it there for now because I don't have a ton of experience. So I'll just leave like with the Yersinia and Yersinia LDI and Hashis. Another question here says, do bodybuilders or people who do heavy weight training have more mitochondria versus an endurance athlete like a marathon runner or a cyclist? So it's a really great question. I love talking about mitochondria. My understanding is that the more muscle mass you have, the more mitochondria you have. Muscles are chock full of mitochondria, and yeah, the larger they are, the more mitochondria are going to be there. Building more muscle through hypertrophy, like increasing muscle size, is one of the relatively few ways, at least to my knowledge, that we can actually increase our mitochondrial density in our body. So it's just such a great asset to do that, and probably the main reason why someone, when they have more muscle mass, they tend to have more energy. They just feel better in part because they have more mitochondria, more ATP kicking around. So generally speaking, stereotypically, to my understanding, folks who do heavyweight training and or bodybuilders who are generally doing heavyweight training would have more mitochondria than marathon runners or cyclists. So folks that have more muscle mass, bigger and bulkier, they're going to have more mitochondria by and large. So with that being said, I mean, some cyclists are pretty jacked. Some of them have massive quadricep muscles. So it just really depends, I think, on the amount of muscle mass that they have. The very last question here, it says, I have chronic insomnia, sleep apnea, fibromyalgia, and chronic fatigue syndrome, among other things. But does neurofeedback help? And the person's from Ontario, so greetings, Ontarian, fellow Canadian. In my experience, neurofeedback can be really helpful for insomnia. It's one of the main indications for that. When it comes to fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, it can be helpful in those cases. It just depends on what the root cause is, what's going on. So if the patient has, like Lyme disease and mold illness and things like that, neurofeedback is probably going to be modestly helpful if they're just full of toxins and microbes. If the fibro symptoms and chronic fatigue are rooted in nervous system dysregulation, then the neurofeedback could be really helpful. So it just really depends on the case. I hope this information was of interest. Any comments or questions, please post in the comment section below. And if at some point you don't mind taking a quick moment to please like, share, subscribe, and or post a quick comment on the video, just saying like thank you or thumbs up or something, I'd really appreciate it. So thanks in advance for taking a second to do that.